You touched on Operation Warp Speed earlier, but I think perhaps the most visible, at least to the general public, the most visible leadership role you had during your career was when you oversaw Operation Warp Speed. Can you share with us what it was like to lead that endeavor and some of the ways you had to be responsible and accountable, other than that one media event that you were mentioning, but ways that you had to be responsible and accountable in the midst of what was an incredibly challenging situation that was highly matrixed with all sorts of organizations across the country?
So I just want to clarify. I was a co-leader with Dr. Moncef Slaoui, this brilliant, scientist. This man he's just done so much for our country and the world in the vaccines that he's developed.
Yes, sir.
He's been responsible for, and co-leading with him was just special. It was remarkable. It was one of those things. We literally met walking out to the Rose Garden, right, on 18 May. And we've become what I'd like to believe is lifelong friends now, right? We worked with each other's strengths. I mean, he clearly was the world-renowned expert in, vaccines, what was going to be the best way to approach it. He defined, how, we were going to go with 6 vaccines, two each for 3 different types, so that we could mitigate risk and figure out which would work best. He was the intellectual giant who understood what was going on in the nation, but could just lead us to that part. And he taught me so much, quite frankly, because I couldn't spell Health and Human Services, HHS, or that was not my world.
Sure.
I'm being tongue in cheek here, but I
Right,
knew
right.
organizations, but and he spent a lot of time teaching me, about just programmatics of how vaccines work, how to select the best ones, to mitigate the risk, how to assess what we had the best chance to really develop and do that. So I'd be remiss if I did not highlight that. And not that you were trying to separate me from that, but when I came on as the co-leader, I was told to focus on the distribution. But what we quickly learned is that we had to increase manufacturing. We had a great individual helping us with that, civilian working on that. We had to control supply chains. We had to figure out the distribution. We had to figure out administration, because we're talking about a volume of, roughly 240 million people out of the 320 million people that existed, right? All
Yes, sir.
adults. We had to figure out distribution, accountability, like, how do we proportionally give it to everybody equally, right? So there's no haves
Mhm.
and have-nots.
Mhm.
We had to overcome, ultra cold temperature requirements. We had to overcome, needle and syringe sizes. We had to overcome, how do you notify the American people? So there was a myriad of things that we just were not ready to do. We didn't have a
Mhm.
plan. We didn't have a structure to do it. We didn't have the financial backing. It wasn't established. The flu vaccine, albeit a great effort every year, is one it's not offensive. It's more
Mhm.
defensive. It's more reactionary. It's almost a 2-year process. And what we were trying to do was go on the offense.
Mhm.
The analogy is we got less than 2 minutes and we got to drive the length of the field. And if we don't get into the end zone, not only will we lose, but there'll be a lot of people that will die, right?
Right.
And time mattered. What also mattered is that we weren't going to violate, right, the rules, anything that would safety impact the vaccine, right?
Mhm.
We had our country is the greatest in many things. One of the great things is the way the FDA monitors and approves medicines, that we take and put in our
Mhm.
bodies,
Mhm.
medicines and vaccines. And so we weren't going to violate that, right? My job was build a team, collaborate with the smartest people in academia and industry, right? And figure out how to bend the laws of physics. And the way we did that was we
All
bought
great
the
tasks.
vaccine. We bought the vaccine before it was approved, and so we could go through all the steps, right, and get it all ready so that when it was approved, I could deliver it 24 hours later. If we didn't do that, if we didn't take that risk, if we didn't have leaders that I worked for, right, the SecDef, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, the President of the United States, both presidents, as it turned out to be, if we didn't have leaders that were going to risk financial, and give me priority, we wouldn't have been able to do that, right? And so because I had leaders that were supporting the mission they gave me, because my approach was to build a team to the mission, right? Make it small and flat, right? Don't worry about having secretaries and aides and the bureaucracy of all that. Just, put myself in a decision loop, right? In the execution, planning, decision loop, right? Work with the best from academia, work with the best from, the scientist world, work with the best from industry. We could get this done. Well, when you do that, when you're doing all that, as I just described, you really got to check all your egos at the door, right? I mean, there was no doubt in my mind I was in charge, co-leading with Moncef. But when it came to everything, manufacturing, supply chain, distribution, administration, right, seeing ourselves, I held myself responsible and accountable to that. That was my job. And so we had to work our way through the bureaucracies of things. We had to work our way through people who thought they knew one way, organizations that thought they knew one way. And we just had to keep pressing, to create the effects we needed to do to get to where we needed to be, right? At the end of the day, there was nothing short of vaccine in arms, right, for the American people.
Yes, sir.
And so the phrase I coined with my team was, we're going to lead from behind. We're not going to stand up and beat our chest and say, do what I do, because we weren't the experts. We were the experts at operationalizing things to effects. We were not the medical experts. We were not, how to produce experts. We were not even the distribution ultra cold experts. We were not the administration experts. What we did is we put all these things, all these objectives together, connected them, and drove operational effects, without violating, our one, red line, no safety things. So, we figured out how to bend the laws of physics. We drove operations to create effects. We built a team, that was very diversified in talent and as individuals. And we just held ourselves responsible and accountable to get there. But I tell people all the time, I'm mildly interested in that. Your ego's out in front of you, right? If you want to go out and come back in, I'll listen. But otherwise, go home. I'll get somebody new.